So are swales suitable for a wet climate? Most people now are saying not. It used to be when permaculture was still fairly new. A lot of people just, it was taught as, in a lot of situations, as being a one fixed solution for anything. No matter what you do with your land, put swales on there, great, everything will go fantastic. Opinions vary now. A lot of people have decided that they're not great in a cold, wet climate, but I still put them in here. So yeah, my reasons. Right, I'll check my cheat sheet. Yes, so we've got a foot of topsoil over very heavy clay. It takes a certain amount of water in winter, and after that it's just going to be squelching because it can't hold on to any more water. So strictly speaking, you'd think putting swale into that would make it even worse. It's going to start infiltrating into the subsoil, it's going to get even wetter, and even when the land's trying to dry out because there's swaling on it, it just won't let you. It's still going to be pumping more water into that subsoil. Insects. And that's true. So what I've done is I've put in a swale that allows me, that gives me the capacity to drain it. I'll cut to that now. So this is my adjustable swale, just like any other swale, except it's got this on the end, which is just a basic concrete block that I've cast with a pipe running through it with a 90 on the end. Now it's set for winter, so you can see water drains out of the swale through the pipe because it's set level and into the pond. The spillway for the pond is set a couple of inches lower than the pipe, so that as things currently stand, the water will not sit in the swale, it'll into the pond and away. In summer, when things are dry and I want to retain water in the swale for growing trees, I just switch that to summer position and it'll come all the way up. It'll come up to the point that it's pretty much just below the level, oops, there we are, just below level of the top of the block. So there we go. A swale that can also drain. So that's a drainage swale. That's what I'm calling it anyway. It's an adjustable swale. You can drive it season to season, month to month. So in the summer, if we've got a particularly wet summer, and I'm concerned that the fruit trees, for example, their roots are getting a little bit too waterlogged, I can adjust the swale pipes so it fully drains, and it'll act like a drainage grid and actually improve things. So it's not just for winter. Similarly, if it was a particularly dry winter, so we're not getting a huge amount of rain, I could again adjust the pipe and we're infiltrating as much water as we want into the landscape. So I get to adjust it. When we first put this one in 2018, it was a very dry year. We didn't get rain for 3-4 months at all. I mean, I dug all these lovely earthworks and then we seeded it and then we just sat there and watched it bake in the sunshine for months. It was very demoralising. It was very frustrating because I'd put in these earthworks that were going to allow me to infiltrate loads of water, and then it just, might as well have not bothered for that first year. But it was interesting what happened. We put in a load of willow cuttings along what is our eastern border. And we went for a hybrid, high-yielding willow cultivar called Bowles Hybrid. It's fairly cheap, very predictable, very reliable. And they survived. They did quite well. I mean, they were not watered. I think we went around once with a watering can. But seriously, there's 200 of them just down that edge there. You can only do so much with a watering can. It was like a glug once. And it's just wicked straight away. I mean, you're talking about hard-packed ground that hasn't seen rain in 3 months at this point, But they survived, which, is impressive in that context. A lot of things were dying. The grass was starting to die off in the edges of the roads and things as you drive around. It was heading into proper drought conditions. Whereas the ones on the swale, that still hadn't had any rain, of course. There's no water infiltration at all into that ditch. There was nothing going into the berm. But the ones on the swale, instead of going up to, say, knee-high, like they were on the eastern edge, they went up to 8-9 feet. And they went in about a month after the others. They'd had less opportunity to grow. And there's a number of factors there. You can't just say, therefore swales are magic, fantastic. No. That was turf mostly that was turned over, but of course most of it was upside down, so you'd got relatively undisturbed ground at that point. There was no grass competition, so that would have given them an edge. There's a bit more microclimate on a swale, and that's the huge difference, I think. It protects, protects from the wind and so on. It also, because the swale obviously isn't dead straight, it weaves in and out, and it gives you all sorts of little tiny eddies and backwaters and stuff in terms of airflow. So you get a huge amount of microclimate. The other benefit that I think is huge with them is that we're, as I say, we got a foot of topsoil. So when I dig the soil out of the ditch and put it on top, I've got 2 foot of topsoil. And that seems to, I think, that would have made a huge difference. But I still don't think it accounts for everything. And now we're, 2.5 years they've been in. The ones across the edge there last year, again, they weren't mulch, they weren't, they had grass competition, all the rest of it, and they put on maybe another 5 or 6 inches. But it wasn't a great summer. Yeah, it wasn't particularly warm, it wasn't particularly sunny, nothing grew fantastically. Whereas the ones on the swale, we cut them off to duplicate them, because obviously we wanted cuttings, cut them down to foot-long sessions, put them in, and all of it went straight up to 9 feet again. So, swales, very good for growing trees, which is of course the reputation that they've got. Okay, that's why I've gone for it. So I thought I'd list a few of people's, we're talking respected professional permaculture designers here. We're not just talking some bloke on the internet talking, right? Like me. We're talking well-respected people with a large body of work of taught for years, right? People whose opinions I actually respect. But so it's an interesting point to just see what their objections are and so on. So it permanently changes the land. Kind of, yeah, I'd agree with that. The ones I've got here, they're about 1 foot deep. If I decided, well, they're rubbish, I don't want them anymore, I haven't gone past the point of no return. All I've got to do is cut the willow down and just come in with a digger. You could do it with a spade, but it'd take a while. Come in with the digger and basically just, you can do it with a bulldozer, you can just push the dirt from the berm back into the ditch, compact it a little bit. Inside a couple of years, it's going to be, more or less back to what it was. The pond's different, that goes down a couple of feet into the subsoil, but that's a pond. Yeah, that's a different thing. A pond is a more permanent structure. You can still fill it in, but still you're going to have, a difference in the hydrology. It's going to tend to be a basin that'll collect water and so on, which, can be its benefit. But my point is, you can put swales in without the pond. You can even put an adjustable swale like this without having a pond at the end. All you got to do is have the pipe monk 90-degree swivel pipe thing that I've got driving it. I should probably choose one name for that, shouldn't I? Yeah, you could install one of them into the base, into a sunken trough. So dig maybe 1 foot deep into the bottom of the swale and fit the pipe in that with an extension on it to bring it up to the level of the maximum height of the swale. And again, you can adjust that up and down and drive the height inside the swale. So instead of going into the pond, you go through the pipe underneath the berm and out downhill. That'll work. You'd have exactly the same effect. One thing you'd have to watch with it, you still need a spillway, because otherwise you're potentially going to have a lot of erosion, and you'd have to make sure that where that water comes out the end of the pipe, that it's armoured some way. There's various techniques for doing it. Armoured in some way so you're not going to get all that water hitting the ground and causing erosion. And something to bear in mind is then you've got all the water that's running out of that swale coming into a very localised place. So that could give you a lot more water where than you actually want in a place that you don't want it. So yeah, permanent change. Maybe if you're doing huge, massive systems on a huge scale, but we're not. Right? I think that's undoable. You can get unforeseen effects to the hydrology. That's true. You are affecting things downstream for people who haven't necessarily agreed to it. It could be your neighbours. Here, we've got one field below us, and then there's the road, and then below that there's another field, and then there's Loch Watton, which is the biggest lake in, the biggest loch in Caithness. It's a big body of water. The entire area around here is covered in springs and wells and small ponds, and it's not an issue here, basically, is what I'm saying. It's not going to be 5 miles downstream I'm going to start flooding someone out. There is no 5 miles downstream. 5 miles downstream is the other end of the loch. So yeah, not such an issue here, because the topsoil is so shallow. You'll get some seepage down into the subsoil, and we want that, especially once the trees start getting down there, and because we've put thousands of trees in. Once those roots go down and start breaking apart the compacted subsoil layer, because it's like concrete, it's amazing, that will start infiltrating more of the water that's being infiltrated in. That water will go down further. I still think it'll take quite a big system to have that sort of effect, but something to bear in mind. Keyline. Keyline's great. It's an amazing technique. If I had 20 acres, I'd definitely be using keyline. The trouble is, I've got 5 acres. It's not a massive plot. It's not very long. I mean, by the time that I drew a plough through it, it'd be, I'd be time to shuffle around, turn around, come back. I'd be doing more turning around than I would be ploughing, basically. There's limits to keyline, in my opinion, on a small scale. First off, I'd need a tractor. Well, I could borrow a tractor from a neighbour, maybe. I've got some great neighbours. But that's a favour I'd rather use elsewhere. I'm certainly not going to buy a tractor for 5 acres. And a keyline plough. I don't know anyone within hundreds of miles that even owns one. So I'd have to buy one in, a lot of money and a lot of expense for 5 acres. I mean, yeah, I could probably rent it out and so on, but it's still a very expensive item to either import or buy secondhand or whatever. So I'm not going to do it. It's a great system. I just don't think it works on this sort of scale. It can, as a way of laying out your land. Keyline's brilliant. I'm talking about the actual ploughing of it, because keyline, again, increases infiltration, deepens your topsoil. Amazing technique. Definitely works. Well proven. Fantastic. Pardon me. And as I said, if I had more land, I'd definitely use it. But I just don't think it's suitable for this site. Next. It can cause landslides. Oh yeah. If you're in steep land that takes on a lot of water, you can cause major problems. In situations where the land is loose, it's a hell of a problem. But we've got a foot of topsoil on a very gentle slope that's mostly clay based, and below that it goes down, as far as I've been able to tell so far, forever, of just solid compacted clay. That is not going to slip. It's solid. It's pickaxe work even in winter if you're trying to dig it by hand. It's just not an issue here. But in most situations, that's something to bear in mind. So I suppose my point to all of this is that you can listen to people that say the swales aren't suitable for you. You can say that some people say the swales are great and you can put them everywhere. Listen to all of their arguments and then apply them to your context, because only you know what your context is. You can ask other designers, you can ask anyone. Great, get as much advice as you can. Ultimately, it's your decision. You know what your land is, you know what your context is. If this field I was going to keep as just a sheep field, for example, which is what most of my neighbours are, I probably wouldn't have bothered putting swales in. And for that matter, I probably wouldn't put in keyline in either. Designing it along keyline principles. But I want to grow strip grazing between swales. I want to grow trees for fruit, nuts, fibre, all the usual reasons. I want to grow a huge amount of willow biomass, because inside, this summer now we're going to be putting in rocket mass heater, the first one of about 3 mass systems that we're going to have eventually. So the idea being that our heating, cooking, our hot water, all of these things will be running off willow that's grown directly here on site. And for that, the swales are awesome. It's possible that after a few years of keyline ploughing with rotational grazing, seriously, if you haven't heard of it, go and Google it. It's an amazing technique. It's fantastic. Pierre Yeoman came up with it a while back. It's superb at improving farmland. But after many years of that, yeah, I could get down to much deeper topsoil to the point that trees would go quite well. But in winter, that land is still going to be waterlogged. The berm that I've got on the swale means that that's always going to be free draining. Them tree roots are going to have some roots above the waterline and some below the waterline. When I say the waterline, I mean the level of the water table, which in most fields here in winter is pretty much at soil level. Whereas that swale berm there has got 2 foot of freeboard, dry-ish draining soil above that water, because directly in front of it there's a big ditch that takes that water away and uses it elsewhere on site. I'm not throwing it away. I couldn't do that with keyline. It's just something that I could not do. So yeah, I think for this context here, for what I want, swales are perfect. Specifically this type of swale. If I didn't have the drainage capacity, and I've got 2 different forms of the same sort of thing going on to the other 2, because it's all experimental, yeah, it should work well. I'm very pleased with it. I'm very satisfied with it. For our context, which is, it's a croft, it's a small holding. It's not something, we're not going to make our living by selling. I mean, if we had sheep on this land, that's not going to give us enough to live on by, a long shot. It gives us a little bit of meat and it gives us a little bit of income maybe, but that's it. Whereas an integrated system of, trees, livestock, of various types, small market garden, all of these things, great, all integrated, can give you an income. And for what we want here, especially with the tree crops, the swales are, I believe, a vital component, a very important part of the system. So yeah, make your own mind up is my advice. Like everything, it all comes down to your context.